to meet you, and the wind be on your back. May the sun shine warm upon you, and the rain fall gently down.
Hello, and welcome back. Today we're at week 53 of the series that will cover days 356 to 362. Or if you have the edition of the Road Rising that follows the calendar, then you'd be looking at December 21st to December 27th. It's been a bittersweet time for the folks at Rendezvous. It's Christmas time, and they can't help but feel the presence of Jesus, and knew that whatever else, they would celebrate his birth. But along with those emotions boiled a seething anger at the men who had taken the life of one of their own. Undoubtedly would continue to threaten every pilgrim that came their way. More than anything, they wanted to go back and wreak vengeance on them. But the more they prayed, the more they were convinced that this was not their fight. The issue was settled when Rodriguez determined to go back and try and tell them the story of God's love, even if it meant his own sacrifice at their hands. So everyone was surprised when 2 days later, Rodriguez returned to Rendezvous with a strange story. Friend gathered a few men and went back to the fortress in order to confirm the account. Let me read it for you. December 27th, day 362. After meeting with Ralph, I decided to leave part of our defense team back at Rendezvous in case they were needed. The rest of us took the 10-mile hike back to the fortress to see what Rodriguez had described. It was just as he had reported. Personal items were strewn all over the ground, evidence that their owners had dropped them where they stood. But where had they gone? There was no sign of a struggle, no bloodstains, no indication of anything but a quick and complete desertion of the fortress. We considered the possibility that a band of demon warriors had dispatched the men like had happened at the castle a few months ago, and like they had tried to do with us at Rendezvous once before. But that theory was put aside for two reasons. First, demons would have left a gruesome mess behind. And second, these men would have been considered allies since they attacked and killed pilgrims. There was only one possibility that made sense, and that was the fact that God had dealt with this situation directly. In our anger for desire and revenge, we had all wanted to come back personally, but were led in no uncertain terms that this was not our battle. And yet, we knew that God had protected us in the past, even by supernatural means, and no doubt would have been able to handle this band of thieves just as easily. Whatever the means, they were gone, and would no longer be a threat to passing travelers. We gathered around the gallows, which incidentally no longer held Steve's body, and prayed a prayer of thanks to God for his mighty hand. The storerooms were indeed filled to overflowing with all kinds of food, utensils, and supplies of every description. It was decided to carry back what we could, and then burn the fortress so that it would never be used again. As the smoke rose from the ruin, I knew the people back at Rendezvous would see it and know that a tyrant was finished. God was still the only true king, and his kingdom would outlast anything man could ever hope to establish. This story is, of course, fiction, but it does have a precedent in God's Word. 2 Kings, chapter 19, verse 35. One angel, 185,000 Assyrians down. That's something to consider as you try to calculate the kill power of an angel. And recall that Jesus had 12 legions of these guys at his disposal on Calvary. That's from Matthew 26:53, by the way. But the point I want to make here is that we need to choose our battles carefully. It's quite possible at some point on your faith journey, you may be called to serve. The Apostle Paul does urge us to put on the whole armor of God in Ephesians 6:13. Keeping in mind, of course, that he's referring primarily to spiritual warfare. But whether the reference is to spiritual or physical battle, the prime consideration is the question of where your call to fight comes from. There's a lot of injustice going on all around us. And if we're not careful, we can let ourselves be drawn into conflicts, well, that are not ours to fight. Especially if your motivation is based on things like a desire for vengeance. You may be very well listening to a voice that does not come from your commander-in-chief. At the end of the day, whether we wage war or peace, may we move forward at the command of God and none other. Y'all come back now, here. And then I have to confess that there's one more part I need to put on paper. I'm calling it Reaching the Heights. It's going to come back to Friend and his family. It's been many years now, and God is calling him to the top of that mountain, the place where his son passed on into God's kingdom. Now the time has come for Friend